Welcome to Subject to Change, a sustainability podcast. Our guest is Greg Moore to talk about leadership and lessons.
So Greg, is your shirt, what's your shirt say? I'm assuming that that's relevant.
Yes, I'm an instructor with the National Cave Rescue Commission. I'm also the Northeast Regional Coordinator. The NCRC is a officially standing commission of the National Speleological Society. We're charged with basically training, promoting cave safety, cave rescue, and also interacting with local agencies.
The RPI Outing Club.
I think, and maybe I'm misstating this, but I think that you got involved with caving at RPI.
Basically, yes. I'd done one or two caves before I got to RPI, but since then, RPI is what really got me into it.
Yeah. So I did some spelunking at RPI as well, but it was just a little bit of fun when I was with the Outing Club. It was awesome. I loved it, but I didn't pursue it after college. I know. And I remember at RPI, and this maybe is a starting point for talking about some of the things that have changed over the years. I remember caving in, a cotton long sleeve t-shirt and having a headlamp that had rocks, phosphorus rocks in it, and that you actually lit the lamp.
Yep. So what you're talking about are carbide lamps. I've got one downstairs. They were used literally for decades for caving and for probably over a century for mining. Basically react water with carbide, give off acetylene gas. The advantages are they actually are nice and warm. They give a nice warm glow and a warm look to the cave. The disadvantage you may recall from your caving tips is depending on how skilled you are with it, every hour or so you're dumping out the carbide or replacing it. But they actually at the time, pound for pound, were more efficient and more useful than normal batteries. Now that we have LED headlamps and lithium batteries, anything like that, every caver's switched over to that. Other than once in a while for nostalgia, we'll go in with a carbide lamp for the fun of it.
Psychologically stuck.
I'm sure it's like any sport where you're going to places you haven't been before. Even when you're bicycling, if you're bicycling on a road you're not familiar with, there are things that you're going to encounter that you're not ready for.
Yep.
You have to have the skills in place for what might happen. And I think that's what was most unnerving in college, because there were a bunch of us that went that knew nothing about caving, and we were just following the lead of the people around us. And the scariest part for me was I actually got stuck for a moment in one of the caves, or fully felt that I was stuck. And it was one of those moments we were going through a very tiny portion to go over to what was kind of like a cistern that we then climbed down like 20 feet or something.
Okay.
And then when we got to the bottom of that cistern, I was like, where do we go next? And the response was, we go back the way we came. And it was on the way back out that tiny little crevice that I felt like I got stuck, and everyone else was ahead of me, and they all got out. And I kind of had to shout and say, somebody talk to me. I have no idea. I'm not moving right now. What do I do? I'm a little nervous. And I had to literally like push with the toes of my boots and just so that and let all the air out of my body just to move forward enough so I wasn't stuck anymore. And it wasn't until they started talking to me that I calmed down enough to actually do that very simple thing. I mean, logic says I got in, I'm going to get out, but logic ran away from me for a moment there.
Oh, definitely. I call that being psychologically stuck. And that's happened to me multiple times, especially if I'm following someone who's a little smaller or younger than I am. And now most of the caves are younger than I am. And too many of them are definitely smaller. They'll be going along like, well, I have an experienced cave. I should be able to keep it. And all of a sudden, you get stuck. And what happens is you tense up. So your body tenses up, your muscles literally enlarge a little bit. And more than once, I've done what you've done. I've literally said, hey, who's ever in front of me, stop for a second. Just talk to me. Like, about what? Like, I don't care. Tell me about your hometown or something. And you take a deep breath or two, and then you just kind of wiggle your way through and you're fine.
Problem solving.
To me, there's sometimes in the smaller caves, there's a bit of problem solving. How am I going to get through that hole? Okay, I got to twist this way. I got to turn this way, move this way. And sometimes it's counterintuitive. You go halfway in, then turn, then twist the other way and come back out and you go through or whatever. So to me, it's also sometimes a little bit of the psychological or the mental of figuring out, how do I do this?
I'm not gonna lie, based on these stories, I was a child that grew up in the 80s and we had those metal railings that were on stairs, and I totally stuck my head through and couldn't get it back out because of my ears. This makes me a little nervous, I'm not gonna lie.
So what exactly is an outing club?
Syracuse has a very great outing club, and they do a lot of caving in this area.
What is this outing club you guys keep talking about? Like there's various outing clubs and I've never even heard of them. What are these?
So a lot of colleges, and this RPI was, I think, one of the first 5 in the nation. I wanted to say 1920 something, started, they call them outing clubs or outdoor clubs, where they basically started going outside, doing activities off campus. In fact, one of the things that attracted me to RPI was the strong student union that it had, and the outdoor club. And so literally our club here, and I don't know what the worth of the equipment is, but has a very large room that is stock full of equipment, half dozen canoes, all sorts of lamps for caving, backpacks, ground pads, literally tens of thousands of dollars of equipment, skis. So basically the club here, in fact, their first meeting is tonight. They'll do hiking trips, they'll do rock climbing trips, ice climbing trips, whitewater trips, rafting trips, kayak, canoe, caving, obviously. If it's not, since I graduated, they've started doing mountain biking trips, for example. So they do quite a bit of outdoors. If Syracuse has a great program, and it's varies in how popular it is, but again, in the 20s, there was a group called the Intercollegiate Outing Club Association, which was basically a group of outing clubs, mostly in the Northeast, that would get together and plan trips. And they did this for 2 reasons. One was basically, hey, we don't have the equipment, you've got equipment, let's go together. For example, I took the McGill Outing Club caving years ago because they didn't have much equipment or experience. We've done stuff with other colleges. And quite frankly, back in the 20s and 30s, well, RPI would do a square dance trip with Smith College, because that's how you got to meet other people, because both colleges were, single sex colleges. And so it was also a social thing of that. And outing clubs actually have a very strong tradition of square dancing for that reason.
A little bit on rappelling and fundraising.
There's a child abuse advocacy group here, and one of their fundraisers is called Over the Edge for Kids.
Oh,
and
wow.
They rappel down a building. I had no idea this was a thing. I'm like,
it's funny you mentioned that. Over the Edge, Jody, so they've done at least 3 times here, twice at the Albany, was it Omni downtown or whatever, that. And there's a photo of my son and I doing it. God, it had to be close to 10 years ago, volunteering for that. And then my wife and I did it over about 4 years ago. They did it over at the casino in Schenectady. That's only about a 5 or 6 story building. And it's great. Over the Edge, I know some of the folks who work there. They do fun. Over the Edge basically is an organization that provides all the infrastructure. So they'll go in, they set up the ropes.
Those people seemed very skilled at what they were doing and very aware of what was going on. So
what's great though is they're always looking for volunteers. So check out their website, and what it is usually Friday night they have an orientation, and you get to rappel for free. And the next day, everybody else is paying $1,000 to rappel off the side of the building. It's a great fundraiser.
There's a lot of leadership in this.
I think one of the things that I've seen in the world of sustainability is a move toward rewilding and getting kids more engaged with nature and being outdoors. So do you see a role for that with caving?
I see it a different focus. And when people tell me or ask me, what did the Outing Club do for me? Honestly, it made me a better leader and honestly a better decision maker. Because students join freshman year and many of them go on to become leaders in their activities. And so, for example, at RPI, to become a caving leader, you had to show certain competencies, take certain skills, take first aid, items like that. And I realized this a couple years afterwards, 2 different incidents, but at one point I was literally signing a purchase order for about $400,000 worth of equipment. And it was like I'm in my 20s, I'm signing this huge thing. I'm like, I've made life or death decisions. This is not a big deal. And quite literally, I've done this. I was on a hike with a friend of mine, Lee Skipper, up in the Adirondacks, one of the high peaks, I don't remember which one. And we got maybe 2/3 of the way up, and we just looked at our watches, looked at the weather, and said, you know what, we're going to turn around. And then we started to count all the times we had turned around and not made a peak, and realized, boy, there was quite a few of them. But we also realized we were still alive. The peak was still there. We can come back next year. And you start to realize when you're responsible for literally for other people's lives, you really develop these skills. And
let's talk a little bit about risk.
Colleges are kind of ramping down on some of the activities that they will allow because of the risk involved to the students, which, as you said, is something they have to be concerned about. And yet they have to understand the benefits of having a controlled, to some extent controlled, interaction with things that challenge you. And isn't that what college really should be? Is an ability to find out what your not maybe the edge of your limits, but the region of your limits, and to learn your own decision-making processes and be encouraged to seriously assess situations on occasion, not just for a theoretical document that you submit to some professor that says, yeah, this is good or this is not good, but to really move yourself forward and a team forward.
Yep. And even more so, I think it's a big part of risk assessment is understanding what the risks really are versus what the perceived risks are. There's some places that have tried to limit caving. Oh, caving is dangerous. But they don't think about, oh, we just had a bus accident taking our football team to another college, something like that.
Right.
We internalize certain risks because we accept them. And then the ones that are unusual, we elevate them much higher.
Come rescue me.
First, actually at a NIOCA conference in college, was speaking to a ranger from the Whites. And back then, cell phones were just starting to enter the mainstream. You know, a few people had them, whatever. But even then, they were already in situations of people on the trail saying, hey, I'm lost, come rescue me. And the rangers were basically saying, no. As a person who does rescue, at least in caves, you know, call me, I'll be there. I'm not going to mock you or second guess you. But there are certainly rescues that I think, you know, you look at and say, yeah, me, I'd hike out with that twisted ankle. And it's that balance of understanding, well, where do we draw the line of discomfort versus safety and everything like that? First lesson that we teach basically is a decision tree. Okay, what happened? Do you need to go call for help? Or can you handle it on your own? Or maybe you should go call for help and try to handle it on your own. For example, oh, you twisted your ankle? Well, here's some stuff you can do to hobble out of the cave, because honestly, that's going to be a lot faster and easier than waiting for someone to try to get you out. Oh, you fell 20 feet and you injured your back and you can't feel your ankle, you can't feel your feet. Call for help, because that's not a good situation. So, you know, trying to teach people, you know, where do you draw the line is an important thing that I like to think we do a good job at.
Is it danger or discomfort?
Maybe we're getting less and less and less informed on what's an actual emergency versus something that we could get ourselves out of.
I think so. I think it's a change in expectation of what's, you know, what can help me out. And again, we get the dramatic rescues of the helicopter swoops in with a high line, drops down a line and plucks someone out of the woods or whatever. But yeah, and there's situations where that is 100% warranted. Yeah. But I'll tell you, a lot of the
maybe it was, I don't know.
Yeah, a lot of the rescues in the Adirondacks, quite literally, the rangers walking up, here's some food, here's some water, let's tape up your ankle, let's help you hobble out. So I'm a big proponent of giving people the skills to take care of themselves and learn what's a rescue, what's not a rescue.
The impact of social media.
Do you think this is a debate that happens a lot in I'm part of a Facebook group that's called the Adirondack Backcountry Hikers group. It used to be the Aspiring 46ers page on Facebook. Thousands of people are on this. This page is so full of beautiful pictures and stories of triumph, and it makes it look so accessible, and people don't realize the rigor that's needed to hike some of the peaks in the Adirondacks. Most of them they're not easy. They're very understandable, most of them, but they're not easy. And people go out there in flip-flops. So where is the balance between promoting nature and underplaying nature? You know,
that's a great question. I'm going to divert that a little to caving, because there's a real divide there. And I'm one of those that kind of sat on both sides of, in the caving community, the National Speleological Society has what they call grottos, which are basically local caving clubs. And, we always tell folks, oh, you want to go caving, join a grotto. RPI's Outing Club is actually a grotto. Syracuse is the other student grotto in the country. But honestly, a lot of cavers like, oh, well, we don't want to tell beginners where caves are because beginners come in, they trash the cave and everything like that. And then their next sentence is, boy, why don't we have any new cavers? And it is that line of how do you get people involved? And I'm a huge fan of, I will take anybody who wants to go in a cave caving, because I'm going to teach them the skills. I'm going to say, this is what you need. And I have no problem turning someone away of, you don't have the equipment. I don't think I've ever done that because I always have extra equipment. I can say, oh, here, you really need this helmet, you need this light or something like that.
He has his equipment.
You have to show you my office. I'll turn on the background later. But the point is, it is that, we want to encourage people, but we want to do it safely. And it's one reason that I think the RPI Outing Club has done a great job of that, of really introducing folks. And I've literally for decades now watched students teach other students certain skills, and here's what you need to be safe. Here's the clothing that you need and everything like that.
Caving and COVID.
Well, I was just wondering if caving increased in popularity over the time of COVID.
No, if anything, it's just the opposite.
Really?
Yeah. In fact, one of our real concerns last year. What's that?
I said it's indoors.
Actually, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
Viruses tend to like cool, moist places, which is what caves are. So a lot of cavers really just stopped caving, not just because of the danger of COVID, but honestly, within the NSS and among us cavers, we were saying, please think twice about caving, because if you get injured, now you're putting us at risk.
It's really about perspective.
That there was something that you said earlier that I found pretty profound. And that you said that this was several topics back. You say you give people the tools to rescue themselves.
Yes.
And that's setting off alarm bells in my mind. Because in my mind, we are looking at these larger instances of catastrophe, as it relates especially to nature and what's happening as far as global warming is concerned. And I'm wondering how we get more people to come in and learn how to rescue themselves in these types of settings, so that it makes them think larger about globally, how do we rescue ourselves now?
That's a good question. I'm not sure how exactly to address that, but I'll give you an example.
I don't know that there is a way to address it. I feel like we should have been addressing it for 50 years since the first
I agree. The problem really comes down to a sense of perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the best way to describe that, and this is true hiking, but even more so caving, I mentioned Cascade and Porter. Cascade is, I think, a 2.5 mile hike in, if that. It's a pretty easy hike. I've made the summit in probably an hour and a half in the winter or something like that, because it's uphill. So it's also, I've made it down from the trail junction to the road in less than 15 minutes because it's good weather and it can kind of run it. So it's very easy to think,
I'm slow.
If I get injured, rescue will be simple. Not realizing that someone has to get there, someone has to hike up to you, someone has to carry down. In a cave, it's even more so. So this is why we try to teach a lot of folks, make this decision tree. Can you move on your own? Can you not move on? If you can move on your own, maybe you can make it to the entrance even before you call 911, or you start moving to the entrance. And I think this is a more apt analogy. In a lot of cases, we can't solve all these problems, global warming by ourselves, but we can start moving the patient towards the entrance, so that when the folks with the litter and all the big equipment do show up, instead of being an hour into the cave, they're 20 minutes from the entrance now, and we can just carry them out much easier. So it's that individual stuff, meeting that teamwork and trying to find out where that works, and having that sense of the time frame is longer than I might think, and I have to give that time frame some thought.
I feel like I'm going to make every major life decision with a decision tree now.
Well,
It's interesting you mentioned that. I blog a lot, and I used to blog more about decision making. The truth is we do. We all have a set of heuristics that help us make decisions. We just don't think about it. When we go into a supermarket, we already, even if we haven't thought about it, we have a plan for how we're going to walk through it. Now, some of that is because they've set up the produce up front, they've set up the cold stuff near back, so they kind of make us walk around the supermarket.
yeah, I do it the opposite.
Okay, you're different, but the idea is we have a lot of these shortcuts that we've developed over time that we haven't given thought about why we do it, but subconsciously we've started doing it. Sometimes it's not worth thinking about, okay, I'm going to go down this aisle and save myself 5 steps from the supermarket. But other times it might be, hey, I'm going to make sure I pick up the ice cream last so that I'm not walking through the supermarket for half an hour with ice cream. So yes, we all have decision trees. Just sometimes we're more conscious of it than other times, I think.
And I think a lot of sustainability work is helping people to understand what innate decision trees they should reassess because circumstances around them have changed. Like the people who, what's a great example? Like it took me a couple years before I realized that maybe I shouldn't be buying yogurt in a plastic container every week. Maybe I could make my own yogurt just as easily and avoid that plastic container. My thought process hadn't taken me there until I tried a couple other things first, and just getting people to recognize their habits and their innate thought trees maybe can help them see opportunities where they can be a little more self-sufficient or prepared for something that they're not necessarily expecting to happen but could happen.
Yep.
Reflections on the Thai cave rescue.
What was most remarkable is one of the doctors afterwards basically said that they expected to lose several of the kids. That's how dangerous it was. And they all survived. I mean, it really is one of those great feel-good stories. And it was thrilling to watch it because I really knew that they had the best people in the world there, but also knowing that this is a tough one. And knowing that they had to make the decision very quickly or soon, because what people didn't also realize is once the monsoon season really kicked in, that whole water level would have continued to rise. So it was a matter of, we have to do it now because things aren't going to get better. At the same time, they did take time to give the kids some food, try to prepare them for this. And a lot of it too was the psychological. This goes back to the psychological stuff, was they actually took, I think it was the 2 oldest kids first, to basically show the youngest, hey, these guys can do it. You can do it. And kind of build it up saying, hey, we're going to do this as a team. And apparently the coach that was with them did some really great, what we'd call psychological first aid of keeping their spirits up, saying, hey, don't worry, we're going to get out of this and everything like that. He was a young man, I think in his 20s, with no real experience on any of this, but he managed to keep these kids alive and safe and everything like that, and keep them in spirits where they were able to conduct this. So I think it's a really remarkable thing. And I'm going to look forward to, there's a couple of movies coming out. One of them is supposed to be really good. I don't know about the others, and there's a couple of books I need to acquire at some point to read more detail on.
Well, that story touches on something that I think is really important in dealing with climate change too, is we have to remember that it's not just creating a solution and doing a technical process. It's also making sure that everyone's engaged and everyone is mentally and spiritually prepared to make the changes they need to make. And that's a little bit of rah-rah, but it's a little bit of dealing with the whole person. And I think that story makes me think that any rescue situation already recognizes that it's not just a technical solution, but you're dealing with a person.
It is,
and that's imperative.
100% true that. Your own life experience there, where you said you got stuck and someone had to talk to you.
Yeah.
It was purely psychological. There was nothing technical about that rescue. The one I mentioned earlier, where the person was stuck 300 feet in, they literally did have to bring in air chisels and chisel away some of the rock. But he was a philosophy major, and in some ways that saved his life. He talks about it, and he basically said he got to the point where he says, well, I got a decision to make. I can live or I can die. Okay, I'm going to live. Okay, what do I have to do? So he was making one decision at a time of what he was going to do for the next 5 minutes, next hour. And the people on the surface the same way. And he would not hear any word of, this is not going to work. It's like, no, keep working at it. We're going to make this work. And a big part of it was just his psychological state of mind. And I never got underground there. I stayed above ground for the entire thing, but I've talked to some of the rescuers who got underground, and they said he was more optimistic than we were, and that helped us. And this is very true. And a lot of the rescuers I've talked to about other people is, the technical is great. We can rig ropes, like, I've got the rigging here. That's, that's all fancy. That's fun. But I'll tell you, probably 90% of the rescues, and most of them you don't even hear about, they don't get written up, are that psychological. Like, okay, here, I'm going to talk to you a little bit. I'm going to relax you. Here, I'm going to just nudge your foot a little bit to get it around this thing. Okay, try to push, let me give you a hand. Very simple stuff. And I think that's important to keep in mind, was a lot of this it's a change in thinking. It's not always the technical solution is going to be, and if we do need the technical solution, it's still psychological. One of my rescues, I literally had to tell the patient, we're going to haul him up this slope, and he had some broken bones. And I'll be honest, this is going to hurt. And he's like, I don't care, just get me out of here. And he got to the comments, that wasn't so bad. But if I hadn't warned him or hadn't prepared him, he might have had a very different reaction.
And the wrap up.
We'll have to get together again sometime, Jody, since we're so close. And Lauren, maybe someday we can meet in person. And honestly, if you do want to try a cave, I got a great one locally that we can take you into. That's a great beginner cave.
Maybe we should maybe we ought to do that. No, seriously, I will do it. I will try.
Excellent.
Cool.
I think it would be a fun experience. So I will give it a shot. Right.
Sounds good to me.
Cool.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much. Good. It was great to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Thank you for joining us for Subject to Change.
On a bike.
All right. Thanks so much.
Yep. Take care. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.